To be collaborating with the Nunavut Housing Corporation, and Severn is the program manager for the Community Housing Transformation Centre, and we'll be explaining a little bit about the fund itself and the process. And Stephen Westlake is the program manager for the Nunavut Housing Corporation, and we'll kick off this presentation explaining a little bit about Nunavut 3000. So I'm going to pass this over to Stephen.
Thank you, Alison. Tunga Sugitsi, welcome everyone to the Nunalingni Piruqpaalirut webinar, the Growth Fund webinar, this lovely Valentine's Day. My name is Stephen Westlake, Program Manager with Igloo Liuquatagingnik, Building Houses Together, also known as the Nunavut 3000 Plan, which is part of the Kachujiluta Working Together commitment to build capacity in the housing continuum of 3,000 more homes by 2030 in Nunavut for Nunavut. I'm here today at the Nunavut Housing Corporation's HQ Pana building here in Avia, Nunavut, and I'm delighted to be joined by my NHC colleagues here in the boardroom, some of which you may see on screen. And there's others that are joining us in Iqaluit and different parts of the country as well, live online. But it's great that this is being recorded. Part of our strategic partnerships integral to Igloo Liuquatagingnik, we have an agreement and are in partnership with this growth fund with our Community Housing Transformation Center partners, also known as CHTC, who will be presenting today. CHTC is funded by us as well as CMHC and has already launched a growth fund successfully in Nova Scotia and is a Canada-wide specialist in providing supports and funding allocations to community housing sector groups and organizations and different provinces across Canada. So if we could go to the next slide. The Nunalingni Piruqpaalirut Fund supports initiatives that strengthen the community housing sector and builds capacity across the Nunavut housing continuum, which we are committed to expanding through Igloo Liuquatagingnik, building houses together in communities across the territory of Nunavut. So on the left-hand side, you can see the 300 transitional housing units and beds, which is sort of the focus of this fund really today. And we're hoping that this will ignite this whole sector and the continuum as we build the continuum together in all the different communities across Nunavut. So you will hear about funding objectives and the 3 streams of grants, the capacity building stream, the planning and pre-development stream, the research and innovation stream. CHTC will explain the application process and supports offered to applicants before submitting applications and also afterwards. The CHTC portal application tool is a wonderful tool. I've had a look at it myself and done a run through briefly with Severn, who's going to be presenting shortly. And I think it's a user-friendly tool and it's also effective and efficient. We look forward to hearing about your innovative ideas and proposals. Before I pass on to CHTC for the presentation, I invite Sandra Turner, who's a senior consultant, and he's been working along the way with the Nunavut 3000 Igloo Liuquatagingnik for quite some time now. And I invite her to say a few words. She has been instrumental with us, and so grateful that she could join us here today. Sandra, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. This is indeed an exciting day when we launch this this program. It's seen for us as a bit of a pre-seed fund that allows us to grow the community housing sector in Nunavut. This is kind of a first. There has not been a whole bunch of support to the community housing sector, so we're really excited to be able to provide some of these supports and give the necessary assistance to those groups, the nonprofit groups in particular, that are doing such good work in our communities. The 300 transitional housing beds that you see on this continuum is actually the target under the Nunavut 3000 strategy. It includes units and beds. So once a proponent comes through this growth fund, there will be an opportunity with NHC or Nunavut Housing Corporation to access additional funding to help with the capital to build any kind of transitional housing, supported housing, shelters, any of those purpose-built units by a not-for-profit. So we encourage all groups to come through this initial plan or initial growth fund in order to get the assistance they need to build their proposal, and then to come back to NHC and we can assist on the infrastructure and try and get those units on the ground to assist those that need it. So very exciting, and happy to hear where we're going with this. Thanks very much. I believe we're over to Severn now.
Hello,
Thank you,
everyone.
Sandra.
It's an honor to be here today as the program manager for British Columbia and the territories. I'm joining you today from the traditional lands of the Syilx and Secwepemc First Nations. I'm very excited, as those before me have stated, to be launching this growth fund. I am representing the Community Housing Transformation Center. Its mandate is to catalyze the growth of community housing everywhere in Canada. We do this by working on special projects with governments such as NHC to leverage special projects that will create infrastructure to close gaps in the community housing sector in Canada. We offer services to nonprofit organizations to help them grow, free services. You can check those out on our website. And we also offer grants such as the Nunalingni Piruqpaalirut Fund. The center was chosen as a partner with NHC due to its long-standing commitment to the community housing sector in Canada. We'll be talking a fair bit about the community housing sector in Canada, just so that everyone's on the same page. When we're talking about that, we mean nonprofit housing providers specifically, co-ops as well, that offer housing and services to folks so that affordability and accessibility are more available to Canada in the evolving housing crisis. As I was saying, the Community Housing Transformation Center was chosen as a partner for its mandate for that, but also because we have existing infrastructure and expertise in helping nonprofit organizations to achieve their goals in bolstering and growing the community housing sector, which I'll speak more about as we go. As Stephen and Sandra were mentioning, due to long-term and systemic challenges, seeing chronic underfunding and underserving in northern communities, we see the results that are an aging and inadequate housing stock, as well as severe overcrowding. This fund aims to be a part of the solution in partnership with NHC. The center has given $200,000, whereas NHC has given $1 million into the fund. So these will be new funds to support Nunavut's nonprofit and cooperative housing. As Stephen was mentioning, there will be three different streams: the capacity building stream, the planning and pre-development stream, and the research and innovation stream. These three separate streams are all a part of the same fund, and you can apply to each of these as per your organization's needs. And we'll talk a bit about what those can help do for you and what I can help do for you as a program manager along the way. The first stream is the capacity building stream. This helps the community housing sector organization strengthen the skills and competencies needed to undertake activities that lead to organizational transformation and growth. Applicants can apply for up to $50,000. Who can apply? Nonprofit housing providers, cooperative housing, nonprofit organizations who are maybe looking to develop capacity to provide housing, community and regional groups and coalitions, etc. Pretty much folks who aren't looking to garner a profit and aren't government. So when we talk about capacity building, what kind of activities might an organization be looking to do to build their capacity that would be funded? In terms of what would be funded, we're talking about strategic planning or business planning, organizational reviews, property management, or project management support, organizational mergers, as well as acquisition planning. Those would all be considered capacity building activities we would fund. Planning and pre-development. This is a stream that's seen a lot of need across the country, so I'm really happy to see it coming to Nunavut, especially knowing that there can be some extra development costs related to northern communities. So this would help cover costs of pre-development activities related to construction of new affordable housing supply. Again, applicants can apply for up to $50,000. And again, the same folks can apply: nonprofit housing providers, cooperative housing providers, nonprofit organizations, community, regional groups, and coalitions. The types of activities that would be covered within this funding include development plans, preliminary plans, site assessments, risk assessments, architectural drawings, engineering reports, as well as other activities which may help an organization to develop along the housing continuum. Those two funds are meant to build capacity towards next steps in a funding process, which Sandra sort of mentioned briefly before. They're not a complete answer to funding whole projects. Next steps in the funding process are available, however, as I understand, through NHC and other government and social services. Yeah. Okay. And so the last funding stream is the research and innovation stream. This is about gathering data to support long-term strategies for the community housing sector and its growth, provide support to undertake activities of innovation, education, and knowledge transfer in the community housing sector. This fund is available for up to $10,000. We understand that academics may also be interested in this, but we also ask that they work in partnership and in tandem with a nonprofit. So nonprofit housing providers can apply, cooperative housing providers can apply, community regional groups and coalitions, etc. And academics can apply as well. We just ask that they do it in partnership with a nonprofit. In this piece as well, in learning more about the housing data available in Nunavut, we see that there's a lot of focus on regional centers. So for example, we'd love to know more about what's happening outside of those regional centers. What are the needs? How can this fund help equitably across regions and across the demographics that need it? So this is an overview of the grant process. We'll come back to this again. But before we start talking about an application, I thought it might be useful to give folks an idea about what happens in the process. So an applicant would begin by speaking with a program manager. We strongly encourage all applicants to work with a program manager. It's my role, or the role of the program manager, to support applicants through this process and see that their projects succeed. We want to see many successful projects out of this growth fund. My job is just sort of to make sure that the application falls within the parameters of what the fund is intended for. And so as long as a program is, as long as an application is eligible in terms of its goals and its activities, it would then get passed to my director. Should it pass the director's review, it would go to a selection committee, which we will definitely speak more about towards the end of the project, or end of the presentation. And then we would move to a contract signing once that was approved. And then we would go into an implementing and monitoring phase, wherein again, the center would support the applicants in implementing their projects to see the best outcomes possible. And in that, we're looking to come alongside the organization as a support more than anything, rather than having oversight. But we do have a reporting process, just sort of like every other grant process. We're hoping that throughout this whole process, however, that our collaborative approach is just that, a collaboration. So when I was speaking about falling in line with what the grant is meant to do, the grant has priority areas and objectives. So we're looking to see that an application falls within these 8 priority areas that were also developed by the Nunavut 3000 strategic plan. That's where the priorities and outcomes are coming from. So the priority areas include reducing homelessness by identifying housing options, increasing stock of affordable housing for vulnerable populations and underrepresented groups, renovating or repurposing existing buildings for the use of the housing continuum, leveraging solutions to ensure improvement of both the social and economic conditions of Inuit, collaborating with communities and partners in poverty reduction, advancing capacity building opportunities within the community housing sector, leveraging resources and supports to expand community housing provision in Nunavut. And finally, providing navigation and support services to people in housing need. The objectives of the fund are to innovate and educate, identify gaps and grow capacity, address systemic barriers, improve leveraging ability, reduce funding challenges, and develop new resources. So when we talk about objectives of an application, we're not looking to see that an application hits all 6 of these objectives. Even if they hit 1 or 2 really well, that's fantastic. If you select multiple objectives throughout your application, you will be asked to report on them. So just keep that in mind if you're applying, to focus on the intended outcome of your project and focus on exactly what it is you're looking to achieve in your objective. We're not looking to see that you do all 6. So moving on to how to apply. This is the landing page for our grants and applications. I'll ask Jean-François to put the link to this landing page in the chat. This is one of the pieces of infrastructure I was speaking about previously in terms of why the center was chosen as a partner. We pride ourselves on a very simple and streamlined process to apply. And again, we work on a collaborative basis. So the program manager, as well as tech support, is available to every applicant throughout the application process. The contact info for both myself as well as tech support will be available at the end. I've sort of taken Stephen through this process a little bit, and his contact info is also at the end as well. So there's a team of folks here to support applicants through this process with their needs, and we're totally willing to meet folks where they're at in terms of their access to tech or however that needs to look. We really encourage you to reach out. We want there to be no barriers for folks to apply. So once you click on grants in the left-hand side of the menu on the previous page, it will take you to the different funds that we offer for folks to apply to. So these are the 3 that are specific to Nunavut, as we have been discussing. And you can learn more at this point about each of the funds from the website, or you can select it and begin an application. Hopefully you've developed a great outline with a program manager for this point, and you know your program, your application is eligible. But these next pieces will be the final steps. So you would select the stream that you would want to apply to. So then it takes you to a page where you will name your project. Please be reminded to keep the name of the project short. There is a letter cap, I think about 120 characters. And then once you select the fund and name it, you're moved on to eligibility. This is a slide that confirms that your organization, as well as your intentions throughout your project, are crafting an eligible project. So these are core pieces of moving on to filling in an application. So you're a registered Canadian nonprofit organization or housing cooperative working in the community housing sector whose activities take place in Nunavut. The purpose, objectives, or related programming of your project falls under the funding objectives, priority areas, and eligible activities mentioned in the Nunalingni Piruqpaalirut Fund. Planning and pre-development description section. I guess that would be the fund that was chosen. That specific section would relate to whichever stream you chose. The amount requested for your project does not exceed $50,000, at least from the center. You may have other funding partners, which is great. Applications must be received by January 15th, 2025. All activities funded by this grant must be completed by December 31st, 2027. An organization presenting a second or additional application should not be in default of any of the obligations set out by ongoing or previous funding contract with the Community Housing Transformation Center. We authorize the center to collect, store, and share all elements of this application with the agencies, collaborators, and partners of the center necessary for processing the application and for proper functioning of the center's activities defined by the center, including its publications, public activities, and research. So you have to tick all of those boxes. And then it moves on to the application proper. You'll see at the top here, bar that the application has 8 different tabs. As you move through the 8 different tabs and you satisfy each of the components, it will provide, instead of a red X, a little green tick mark. So within that first tab, you'll be asked to provide a brief summary of who partners will be and their involvement, what expected challenges may occur and how you might overcome them, and how the org will ensure long-term sustainability of the projects. And then it will move on to an objectives tab. So here we see the outcomes and what is the geographic scope of your project. We're looking to see again that our funding is distributed equitably throughout the population of Nunavut. So outcomes should be tied to objectives, and outcomes should show that objectives are being met. They should illustrate what project milestones will look like as well. So in this drop-down menu, taken directly from the outcomes before, that we're looking, or taken in relation to the objectives we were looking to see, you can just pick what outcomes you're looking to achieve. So needs and outcomes, as I was saying, should be tied to objectives, and outcomes should show that objectives are being met, should illustrate that what your project milestones will look like. So for every objective you select, needs and outcomes will pop up along the way and will set your milestones for your project. This moves on to timeline and activities. So each project has 3 phases, or will have 3 phases, beginning, middle, and an end. Or in the application, the stages are planning and initiation, implementation, and closure. So this will look different for each of the funding streams. However, each section will have selected activities that are eligible and funded activities, fundable activities that we will discuss, program manager to applicant. as well as a timeline of execution. So in the beginning, say you're doing a capacity building project, you're working on a strategic plan toward the next steps in the funding process for housing development. So in the planning and initiation phase, you would give yourself the time you would need to maybe hire a project manager to build a strategic plan and a timeline alongside that. And then in the implementation phase, look at implementing that strategic plan. And in the closure phase, look at applying for your next streams of housing. Does that make sense? And each of those phases will have a timeline of execution tied to it. And then the next section is project impact. We're looking to see the geographical scope, the size of community. We're looking to see, is the neighborhood or region that the project is taking place historically underserved or marginalized? As we've been speaking, we know that the North is chronically underserved, and therefore most folks applying within Nunavut, the answer will be yes. When you select yes, a box for further explanation will appear, because even within knowing that the North is chronically underserved, we also understand that there is nuance within that. Are you in a regional center? Are you serving Inuit? Are you serving folks experiencing addiction or mental health? What are all the nuances there? But we understand that most folks applying to the Nunavut Growth Fund will say yes. So we want to know about the type of housing targeted, demographics targeted, differing questions based on the stream being applied for. Is the project transformational, and is it knowledge sharing? So the last and final sections, two of the last sections here, budget and contact. This is the part where we put in what the final financial request from the Growth Fund is. What other financial partners are there, or what other potential financial partners are there? Who else are you speaking to? What are you applying for? Are there other grants available for this project? Revenue, internal and external. Expenses, what kind of personnel will you need? Internal and external. Direct costs, travel, materials and equipment. Indirect costs such as rental space and insurance, and administrative costs. Other. Those expenses should be pretty direct. We're looking at expenses directly for the project. Primary and secondary contacts in charge of the application. Those are people who will be filling out the application and responsible for the application itself. An accounting contact is someone within your organization who handles money and who will be notified of payments to be received and final stages wrapping up with final payments. Two signers, people with authorization from within the organization to take responsibility for funding and money, and who can legally sign for the organization. It's pertinent to know here that we have a library of contacts within our database. So there may, the people you're looking for may well exist. If they do not exist within the database, there's an opportunity to create a contact information for them. Okay, and then the final stage of the application process is uploading some files. Again, this is very simple. You can drag and click or use a traditional upload menu. Again, tech support as well as myself or the program manager will be available to support. The documents we're looking for are a copy of your incorporation documents. So just proving that you're a nonprofit. A void check for banking information so that we can pay you out through the grant. Latest audited financial statement, board approved budget. Names and contact information of 2 references. This can be either government or other nonprofits you've worked for who can vouch for your capacity to achieve the project or objectives that you're looking to achieve. In applications for 25,000 to 50,000, we're looking for at least one letter of reference, as well as your latest financial statement. Okay. And here we have the 360 review of the overall application process again. As I said, we would be going through. Organizations, again, are encouraged to work with the center from their initial project conceptualization to ensure the project they're applying for meets priorities, objectives, and eligibility criteria of the Growth Fund. By encouraging organizations to engage with us early in the project development, we can help shape ideas that will lead to successful proposals, which is our goal and objective. As mentioned previously, we want to see you succeed. Once a project has been submitted, 2 reviews of the proposal will happen by the program manager. The first review ensures that the project meets eligibility criteria in order for it to move forward. The second review, the in-depth review, is more detailed. It's a more detailed analysis of the project. This review will focus on all aspects of the project, its financial and organizational capacity, the clarity of the request, the ability to highlight and meet existing gaps in capacity or services, as well as the impact the work will have, the demographic being served, and other key concepts in order to ensure the success of the project. After this review, the program manager may return to the applicant with suggested revisions to make to the project to make it stronger and to ensure a funding recommendation. This recommendation is then sent to the Center's Director of Operations to validate, and once approved, the recommendation will become available to the selection committee. Again, a bit more about this in a minute. The selection committee will review the application and vote on whether or not they think the project should be funded. Once approved, the funding agreement is created and signed by 2 representatives from the applicant organization, as I was speaking about previously. Those are the 2 signatories. And this is highlighted in the contract section of the application. The center's operations director is also a signatory for the center. After those folks sign, a payment schedule is created, as well as a reporting schedule, and the applicant is able to start implementing their project. So we usually give a large portion up front after the project is signed, and then we start the reporting process on the different phases of the application, the beginning, middle, end, planning and initiation, implementation, and closure. But a bulk of that money is given upfront so that people can start working on their project. Going back to the selection committee, we currently have 3 permanent members on the selection committee, but we are looking for more members. Please reach out if you're interested or know folks who might be. We're additionally looking for floating members who can be asked to step in to review a project if a committee member states that they have some sort of conflict of interest or loyalties. Pardon me, Director of Programs, rather, Director of Operations, forgive me. The selection committee will be made up by people from Nunavut with expertise on the needs of their respective communities and their knowledge of best practices in the housing sector locally. Selection committees have been an excellent resource for the center in the past in understanding appropriate costs and providing their input on proposals where needed. Again, this is another phase in the process to help the community come alongside the applicant to ensure the best possible outcomes on their project. And that brings us to questions. This is sort of the team that's here to support you. Please reach out. I'm really anxious and eager to start talking to everybody. Really looking forward to working with all of you. Again, the IT department their email is there if you have any questions about the portal or the online application process itself, as well as Stephen, who's been a wonderful support throughout this whole project as he's come on board. His information is there as well.
Great. So we'll begin with Q&A. There's been a few recurring questions here, so I will open up the questions to all panelists. Panelists, feel free to unmute and take a question if you are able to answer it. One question asked a few times now is, what supporting documentation do we require from a coalition to prove that it is a coalition?
That's a great question. I think that there should be, if you have some kind of founding documents, even maybe minutes from meetings, that sort of thing is the first thing that comes to my mind. I don't know if folks have other input on that answer.
Yeah, I'll expand on that a little bit. So we would need to see that you are incorporated as a nonprofit organization. So you would need to be a nonprofit incorporated coalition.
Great. We also have a question here from Jesse Hale. They spent a long time trying to work on the application, found it a little bit slow with their internet connection. Is it a possibility to submit an application via PDF or by email?
So we're working on that process, I believe, as we speak. One of the other options is that we might be able to arrange for a phone call in which I could use my internet connection and submit. We're definitely, as I was saying earlier, looking into ways to make sure that there are no barriers for folks in applying. Allison may have more to say on that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Seven. That's pretty much it. I think the online portal, there are some areas that we would want to kind of have this as a collaborative process, just because if it's submitted as a PDF, then that could extend the process of going backwards and forwards. If we need modifications to the application or to the budget and things like that. Whereas if you did have if you were having issues with internet connection, scheduling a phone call with Seven to potentially complete this online in order to reduce that amount of backwards and forwards.
Great. A follow-up question. Are any of these resources or is the application portal available in Inuktitut?
Yes, it is. That was one of the priorities of the center. So all of the application online is available in Inuktitut.
In terms of timing, if the deadline is January 2025, does that mean we can expect the funds to be rolled out February, March 2025, or will applications be reviewed? So maybe we can talk about a little bit about the post-application timing.
We have a pretty quick turnaround time generally. I think I might be blurring which fund I'm remembering, but I believe it's within 90 days that we give an answer, and then from there it's we look to start rolling out money within 2 weeks after the contract is signed. Is that correct, Allison?
Yes, that's correct. And that 90 days does not include the time that an application has been returned to the applicant if there has been a request for more information. So that 90 days is the time that the center has the application in one of the stages that we are responsible for completing. But the 90 days is also, it can also be an awful lot faster than that too. So that's our maximum. We aim to have applications completed significantly sooner than that. And I see Sandra has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add too that it is open ongoing. So the fund is set up to be open ongoing. It's not like it's batched into and then prioritized or anything like that. It is open and ongoing. And in the event that we do run out of funding, NHC and CHTC will take another look and determine whether we can repopulate those funds. So don't worry about that. It's just a matter of when you need it, and then you go through the process, but you're not competing with anybody, or it's not batched up as a rollout. It's just ongoing.
Great point.
Great. Question in terms of eligibility criteria. Can a nonprofit with a housing project apply that's not necessarily a nonprofit, that's a community housing organization?
Yes. So if you're a nonprofit that's looking to develop your capacity to provide housing, or if you're looking at it as a possibility, things such as a feasibility study or a strategic plan towards being able to do that is absolutely something that we can talk about within the capacity building funding. Any nonprofit who's interested in providing community housing or stepping into the sector is absolutely encouraged to speak to me. And I think that there are definite avenues within the capacity building stream that we can discuss. Again, I'll open it up to my fellow panelists if there are any further comments.
I guess I can just add that, you know, this support to the community housing sector is to raise that capacity. And then there are other programs and other funds available. We recognize, though, that the community housing sector does not just require the infrastructure for the housing. We know that operators require support and that kind of thing in order to operate these units. So Nunavut Housing Corporation has a working group that we co-chair with Family Services, a supported housing working group. And we have health on it, justice, family services. We're working together with those other departments within Nunavut to make sure that there's other sort of capacity areas looked at through their departments as well, and working collaboratively. So if you're a not-for-profit wanting to enter into that community housing sector in Nunavut, great, but there will be other options around supported housing and housing the vulnerable that might not just be the infrastructure. It's just that Nunavut Housing Corporation can only do the infrastructure piece, but we're happy to talk to you and move you down the right path to make sure your project is successful.
Can multiple organizations collaborate on a single application? And if so, could they request a larger amount of money? Or could multiple organizations request 50,000 each and then pool that money?
I can take that one. So we do request that organizations only be applying for the $50,000 per project. And that would include the entire development would be considered a project. So in the case of collaborating to and then pooling the money, we would encourage, the money is only allowed for that one project, but we would definitely encourage you to have conversations with Stephen to identify other funding sources that could be available to you for the activities past those that the funds are received from the fund.
I can also add to that, Allison, Nunavut Housing Corporation does an annual expression of interest as well, and it just closed this year, but this is the second one we have done as part of the Nunavut 3000 strategy. So if you go through the center to get your proposal in place, then you can come to Nunavut Housing Corporation to come through the expression of interest, and then we can take a look at whether or not we can fund some additional monies towards your project. So there's a multitude of avenues to access funding. This is sort of the pre-seed piece that sort of gets you through the door and then onto the path. So you know, don't let it discourage you that if you feel there's not enough money for a collaborative sort of arrangement with other partners. Just get on the path and we'll see that we can make it happen.
We've had also a few questions about audited financial statements. If, for example, an application does not include them, or if some of those statements are not produced, is there another approved budget or an unaudited financial statement? Would that be sufficient for the application process?
Yeah, so in terms of if an organization is very new and doesn't have an audit that has audited financial statements that are already ready for submission, we would accept a board approved fiscal year budget. So not just the budget for the project itself, but for the entire operations for the fiscal year. If an organization has been in operation for a little while but does not have financial statements that are audited. We can accept reviewed financial statements, which is kind of that one step down and a little bit less costly. And we very, very much encourage organizations to submit in their application for administrative costs, which can include the review of the financial statements. If you haven't done those already and are planning on doing it with the administrative costs, then you can submit the board approved fiscal year budget. And one of the conditions that will be listed in the funding agreement is that before the final payment is made, then we would need to be in receipt of your reviewed financial statements.
Great. Just a few final questions before we wrap up today's session. Under the planning and pre-development stream, can the proponent use an out-of-country technical firm to create preliminary designs, or is it are there limitations therein?
No, it is entirely up to the organization with regards to who they choose to be their consultants on the project. What we will request from all applicants is that if you have been given a quote from a consultant or an organizational business, that you submit that quote along with your application.
And how many applications have been approved so far since the fund started in spring 2023?
So the platform has only very recently gone live. So yeah, within the last couple of weeks, the platform went live. So we haven't received any completed applications so far. There have been a couple that have been started, but none that have been completed and reviewed yet.
And I think we'll close out today's session with this final question. Sandra touched on this a little bit. These amounts do seem a little bit potentially low in today's economy with the cost of doing business rising. Will there be any kind of rethinking of the maximum thresholds or funds allocated during this process, or perhaps in the next cycle?
I think I'm gonna go back and touch on what Sandra mentioned earlier about this being the kind of like the pre-seeding side of things. So we do recognize that these amounts are low, but they are only intended to be a part of the funding of a project. So as Sandra mentioned, this can be the beginning phases of a project, and definitely to reach out and be in touch with Nunavut Housing Corp to look into other funding opportunities available to realize the entirety of the project.
I'll only say this as well, that some of that capacity building can really enable organizations to take on those other pieces and to proceed down that path later on. And as a program manager, it's part of our role to help see that you can succeed in those next steps and set up organizations for success in that path. And we would hope to do that.
And I guess I can add too that there are many pots of funding available for affordable housing projects, housing the vulnerable populations. We are constantly, as Nunavut Housing Corporation, applying to what we can, but also becoming very aware of the other pots out there, and I think can be a source for you to navigate that. So feel free to ask us. Recently the Nietzsche funding, for example, for Indigenous projects just closed. Those are significant pots. They're also very structured, or very much structured to be stacked. So any of the Nunavut Housing Corporation funding that we have, it'll be up to $100,000 a bed, $150,000 capital for a unit, a self-contained unit for any of these projects that will assist in the construction costs. That's going to be the supported housing program, similar to what we have for developers for the affordable housing side. So there is significant money. It's just a matter of how you stack it and how you structure it. And that's where this collaboration with CHTC and NHC can assist you in putting that together.
And with that, I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. I'll open it up to our panelists for maybe a final closing comment.
Maybe Stephen, we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Alison. I just want to thank Alison and the whole team with CHTC for putting this all together, all the preparation work that has gone behind all this and developing the portal and the application process and the presentation. And thanks very much, Seven, for a great presentation with good explanations and clarity there. And hopefully we've been able to cover some of the questions you've got. You know, no doubt there'll be more questions. You know, do feel free to send us an email or contact us, reach out to CHTC, reach out to Sandra and I and the team here at HQ and also in Iqaluit, and working diligently with Igloo Iruqpaalirut and this growth fund, which is really like a catalyst for change, is the way I see it. And then, you know, segueing into different pools of funding that can help with the infrastructure, but also the operations, like Sandra's saying, as we develop the working group for supportive housing. So looking forward to receiving the applications, and you know, the selection committee will be made up of 2 from CHTC, 2 from NHC, and 2 community members involved with community housing and specialists in that realm. So, you know, we're hoping to get the process running pretty quickly and the turnaround pretty quickly. In fact, CHTC has a reputation for quick turnarounds, which is great. So be innovative, be bold, and yeah, looking forward to working with you all.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor to speak to you all today. I'm looking forward to working with you.
Very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great day.